Hey there, Eduardo from Beta here, and in this video today we are going to talk about skills and knowledge in education. Which one education focuses the most and which one it should focus the most. Galera, você já sabe o vídeo em inglês, liga a legenda se precisar, ou então vai no nosso site lá, o link também está embaixo, que você vai ter acesso à transcrição de tudo que eu estiver falando em inglês e a tradução do lado. Então já chega dando like e vamos ao vídeo. First of all, before watching this video, I suggest you watch these two videos I've created before. While they're not mandatory for understand this video, they lay out some nice groundwork. Well, the first thing that I need to explain here is the difference between skill and knowledge. To learn a skill, you need to practice. To learn a knowledge, you need to study. There's a good example that illustrates well this point, which is when you study music. You normally study the chords, the scales, the triads, the classical composers, and that kind of thing. But that doesn't necessarily make you play well an instrument. In order to play well an instrument, you need to practice, you need to play it. Of course, if you can align both knowledge and skill, you will reach higher levels of performance. But I think now you have a pretty good idea of what is a skill and what is a knowledge. And the central point that this video is about is that education focuses too much on knowledge and too little on skill. You see, the idea of education is for the student to acquire basic knowledge over various subjects. Exams were designed to assess how well a student acquired certain knowledges. And in this video I talk a little bit about on how getting good grades also involves certain skills such as time management and emotional control. But this, from my perspective, is just a consequence of the way exams are. Your grade doesn't differentiate lack of knowledge or lack of practice in these skills. That is for you to analyze. And the idea here is that these two skills, for example, time management and emotional control, are far more important to every student than basic knowledge over chemistry, over geography, or over biology, or over any other subject that is commonly taught. In fact, when you go to the workplace, when you join the workforce, knowledge is not what is required the most from you, it is skills. Skills are the determining factor of employment. And there are 4 skills that are said to be, they are commonly known as the main competences, the most desired, the most important competence of the 21st century. And they are creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. And these skills are not fostered in education. They are not assessed in education. They are not taught in education. Well, to be fair, critical thinking is addressed by some teachers indeed. But communication and collaboration, well, there are a few opportunities to improve them during education. You can improve your communication when you have to make a presentation, and you can improve your collaboration when you have to work in groups. But improving these skills is not the goal of these practices. In fact, it's done in a very clumsy way and often leads to very bad experiences for the students. They do not improve these skills at all, even in these opportunities to learn them. Critical thinking is somewhat addressed, collaboration and communication not so much, but of all these 4 skills, by far the one that is most neglected by education is creativity. That is an understatement, really. I think it would be more accurate to say that education murders creativity in cold blood. And the way they do that, and the way education, the standard model of education does that, also makes them less effective at teaching their focus, at teaching the knowledge that they want so much to focus on. And to understand this a little bit better, I will talk about a tool that is directly linked to education. This tool is called Bloom's Taxonomy of Higher Order Thinking, and it can be represented by this pyramid here. There are multiple ways to represent it. This pyramid just happens to be one of the ones that are most used. The idea here is that this guy called Bloom, he created a hierarchy of these skills. All of these stages in this pyramid are different skills that regard learning. He classified the skills that lead to better learning, that lead to higher order thinking, that you need to put a lot of thought upon. You see, I've already talked about it in this video here, but the way that education works, even though they want students to acquire knowledge, the volume of content and the uselessness of content that is taught in education, it leads not to acquire knowledge, but to recalling and memorizing information. And there is a huge difference between both, because acquiring knowledge involves learning, recall information, no. So in the end of the day, education requires students to most of the time only recall information, to memorize and reproduce what is said, reproduce what they read, reproduce what they study. If you go to an exam and just vomit on the paper everything you've memorized, chances are you will get a very good grade if you've memorized correctly. Training students to reproduce, to replicate, is one of the best ways to kill creativity. And let's just take a quick look once again into this pyramid. The most basic level of thinking. Look at what it is. Remember. Recollection of information leads to the most superficial kind of learning. And look at where creation is. It's right at the top. So if education were to prioritize creation, prioritize creativity, it would definitely lead to a much better, to a much deeper learning. And learning not only on skills such as creativity, but also on the knowledge that is currently taught. So training students to reproduce makes their learning of their knowledge superficial, and it kills very important skills as creativity. And something that really pisses me off is that there are good alternatives. Practices such as project-based learning and problem-based learning are practices that stimulate students to learn, to look for the knowledge that they want to learn, but also are practices that foster these four skills: communication, creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. They assess these skills, there are rubrics for them, they teach these skills. And another thing that is just wonderful is that most of the knowledge that is taught in schools, that education deems necessary for students to learn, most of this knowledge can be accessed in 3 seconds on Google. So is that really what we want our students to know? Things that can be easily looked up on Google? Again, when information was not so easily accessible, 50 years ago, recalling these kinds of information, learning and acquiring these kinds of knowledge, well, it had its value, but times have changed. This kind of knowledge that can be accessed like this on the internet has no value at all. I mean, there's a little value. I'm not saying that knowledge shouldn't be taught. It's just that skills, these kinds of skills are much more important. And just one thing else, there is a subject that is currently taught in schools, for example, that this subject has so much potential. and I actually don't remember the name of it in English, but it's the subject that teaches you to write essays, okay? This subject has a great potential for critical thinking and creativity because you have to expose your arguments, you have to back them up with data, you have to, create something. So it's directly linked with creativity, it's directly linked with critical thinking. But even in a subject like that, with so much potential, we teach students to reproduce. We teach that these three are great opening phrases. In the second paragraph you should say X, Y, and Z. You should, the conclusion should have the elements A, B, and C. And we say how they're supposed to do these things because these things, they tend to get you higher grades. And since that's all education is about today, getting good grades and not learning, it's hard, but we'll get there eventually. We'll get to a place, we'll get to a society where education is taken seriously. So if you like this kind of content, just subscribe to the channel, ring the bell. I've already told you to like the video, I think, but like it again, I don't know. It will help me greatly. It's really important to the message that I want to pass through this video. So, see you next video.